they take to be a real complete commitment to the teachings of Jesus. They tend to be legalistic in terms of what their religion's about, but nevertheless they're very serious. And I always remember lately the statistic that when they give their kids a chance to go out in the world for a year at 19, 90% come back. Isn't that something? That's really impressive. So anyway, there's that group, and then the gradual accommodation that you have in the Church of the Brethren today. But then there are the new sectarians, which are not full-blown sectarians, but taught by a guy called Stanley Hauerwas, who also is my age, and retired from Duke Divinity School, who made a huge impact on liberal Christianity and on even some evangelical Christianity with his pacifism and his refusal to get involved politically or to engage in military action or police action. And I must advise the group that our pastor went to Duke Divinity School pursuing Stanley Hauerwas, yes.
Yeah.
But he never took a course with Stanley Hauerwas.
I never took a class from him. I'm good to go. But Bob's still getting me straightened out. Don't you worry.
Well, Stanley Hauerwas was taught, or it was a good friend of a Mennonite theologian by the name of Yoder, who wrote a book called The Politics of Jesus. And Stanley was totally convinced by that. So, as a guy from a Methodist background, a profane guy, he cannot keep from using bad language.
I can tell you stories later.
I'll tell you that story. My first job was teaching at the seminary in Rock Island, Illinois, at the seminary, and the college was Augustana College. And there was some guy in the religion department that was notorious already. He'd just come the same time I came, new faculty member. And the rumor was that he read a book a day. As a new faculty member, what? Writing a book a day. But he also cussed in class.
Oh.
And the president of Augustana College was a pious Swedish president who, when he heard that what Stanley was saying in class, he got rid of him. So he got fired from Augustana College and wound up at Yale, and so he was a very distinguished ethics professor. But he argued that Christians should not be involved in political life, nor should they be involved, particularly in armed forces or policing, because it involves coercion. And anything that involves coercion is out of bounds for Christians. So I once was on a panel with him, and the question becomes, could a Christian become a senator? And of course, as a good Lutheran, I said, of course, that's a noble occupation, a calling. And Stanley, when it came to Stanley, he says, well, he said, maybe, but wouldn't last 3 or 4 months, because he'd vote against everything that was defense, or he'd vote against anything that was armed forces. So Stanley said a lot of witty things. I shouldn't get off on this, but I had him at Roanoke College, and a lot of faculty think you should never show your own convictions to the students. You should let them make up their own minds. And Stanley screamed one day at a lecture, he said, "What?" He said, "Of course you want the students to think what you're thinking. Students don't have minds worth making up." So that went over well with the students. But it did, the faculty liked it. Anyway, there's other ways to separate religion from politics, keep religion free of dangerous politics. One thing is, in fact, the pastor mentioned it this morning, to just take justification as the full meaning of the Christian faith, without sanctification, without life in the world, so that politics has nothing to do with your religion. You're free in Christ, and so forget politics. And the practical separation of Sunday and Monday, which probably most Christians do, or a lot of Christians do, they don't translate their Christian faith into political life. Aren't we encouraged to vote your self-interest politically? Right? That's the ideology. Vote interest, your self-interest. The politicians come to you and say, "Were you happier better off now than you are then. But of course, we're called to do far more than our self-interest. In fact, that should come down the way a little bit, except if you're retired, then you can put it. Anyway, so a lot of people just don't make the connection between some and so. But, so there's that practical separation. But then, I go into a little excursus there about Dreyer arguing that the culture and the politics are so demonic by now that we should retreat. Now, he's not a theoretical Christ against folks person, but he's Christ against this culture. We've lost the culture war, he argues. Politics now has been completely penetrated by alien ideologies, and the culture around us is poisonous. That's not hard to convince me when I see the lyrics of some of the popular music that's around, and the entertainment, pornography, access to all of that on the phones. You begin to think the culture really is decadent and going to fall apart quickly. So, yeah.
Part of what's interesting about Dreyer is he's taken the withdrawal so strongly that he's moved to Europe. On the other hand, he's really good friends with J.D. Vance. He put J.D. Vance on the map, actually, with a very prominent conversation with him after he published his book 6-7 years ago. So, what's that? Consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, right? I mean, he's not necessarily consistent all the time.
Where in Europe does he go?
Hungary.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, deep down theologically, he's not a Christ against culture person
I
at
don't
all.
think so.
But he thinks this culture is so bad that we should find ways to live apart from it. And the first book, The Benedict Option, convinced some of our people at St. John to leave and join,
Miles.
Miles Hickson.
not Mark, what was the guy's?
Miles.
Yeah, joined him, and then he left the Anglican Church and has become Orthodox, evidently. Anyway, they developed a communal life where they were going to try to live the Benedict option. And so a lot of people have been convinced by that option. And then Dreyer wrote another book, Live Not by Lies, in which he interviewed hundreds of people from Eastern Europe who had survived both the Nazis and the communists. They constructed subterranean networks of Christians who supported each other clandestinely and carried on a vibrant Christian culture underneath the surface, kind of like Bonhoeffer did in the Nazi times in Germany. But this was even more clandestine. And he interviewed all these people and how they survived the totalitarian cultures around them. So his second book, Live by Lies, is an account of those sorts of people and how he thinks we have to begin to pay attention to that, how to create a subterranean Christian subculture. And the third book, as I mentioned before, is Enchantment, where he wants to get away from politics and talk about the revivifying of Christian spirituality, the transparency of the holy in our ordinary lives. So I ended with Dreyer's stuff, and Andy already covered Peggy Noonan and say, well, is this all overwrought? Most of us are not going to go into communes or do the Benedict option, but I think churches like Messiah, where we're all pretty highly committed, I think, can carry on with the torch of true Christian life in a society and be willing to suffer if we must. I'll leave it there. She suffered, so other people may have suffered too this week. So next week we'll do fusion. That's another bad way. Is there things such as white Christian nationalism? Other kinds of fusion. Okay, we'll do that next week.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Bob.
your attention.
I'll probably be